Taxi and Uber drivers, what is the strangest and most interesting thing you have overheard while driving a client? Let's find out. I worked as a taxi driver while I was in college. Around that time, my girlfriend, whom I had been dating for about a month, confessed to me that she had another guy from Germany. She told me everything about their relationship and admitted that she planned to move in with him soon. Naturally, we broke up. A few months passed. I picked up a drunk couple near a bar. They sat in the back and started kissing. I realized the guy was speaking German. We drove to the girl's house, and she got out. Then the German guy said we were going to his place. On the way, he started telling me that he had recently moved in with his girlfriend and finally waited for her to leave for the weekend so he could cheat on her. Then he added that American girls are very attracted to guys with accents, and his girlfriend has no idea how often he messes around with other girls. As you probably guessed, it was that same guy. I drove him to my ex-girlfriend's house without saying a word. I wonder how they are doing now. I work for Lyft. Once at 11 p.m., I got a request to drive 4 passengers from Boston to a casino in Rhode Island. It was at least an hour drive, but I accepted anyway. I arrived, and 4 middle-aged Asian men met me and explained in broken English which way was best to go. Now for the weird part. While we were driving, for the entire trip, they said only one word, caramel. I am not kidding, grown men sat in my car and took turns saying the word caramel. It was not a joke, they were not laughing. There was no reaction, just caramel. They would whisper it, or sing it in different tones. Sometimes in unison. Sometimes they would pause for 10 minutes and sit in silence. Guys, it was weird. When we arrived, they asked me to wait for them and drive them back. I bailed. That was the wildest thing ever. I am not a driver, but once when we were in Vegas, I was riding in a taxi with my wife and heard our Pakistani driver discussing my wife's appearance on the phone. He was not aware that I learned Urdu during my military service. I had to surprise him. And I did. When he handed me my change, I said thank you, goodbye in Urdu. And then for about 5 seconds, I sat with a stupid smile and watched him have a stroke from such a plot twist. I once drove 2 divorce lawyers who were representing opposite sides in the same case. They spent the entire ride discussing options on how to drag out the divorce process as much as possible. I assume to make more money? Yes, they have an hourly rate. It is a fairly common phenomenon for lawyers to intentionally delay cases to rip people off. But when 2 lawyers from 2 sides conspire with each other, that is just too much. It was night, I missed the last bus and called a taxi. As soon as I explained to the driver where to go, his phone started ringing. He apologized and closed the partition between us so I would not hear him. But something apparently went wrong because I heard him very clearly. I heard him whisper, "I will take a kilo, I will be there in 20 minutes. Then he lowered the partition, apologized again, and as if nothing had happened, started asking me about a recent football match. Such a nice driver. Just to clarify, this was in South Florida, so there is a huge chance he was talking about coconut. Or maybe not. Taxi drivers are ideal candidates for transporting stuff. They are constantly on the move and rarely searched. Plus, if you get caught, you can make up a ton of plausible excuses. I had one regular passenger, an older woman who always had to look after her 5 grandchildren because her children could not handle them. I drove her to shopping malls, to the bank, took the kids to school. I did a lot for her. And then she started calling me at night, and it turned out she was working as a lady of the night. I moonlighted a bit as a taxi driver in Boston. One time a very beautiful couple gets in. Or rather, I thought it was a couple, although the man was clearly older than his companion. They started discussing out loud their move from Boston to Paris. I got very interested, so I decided to ask when they were moving and for how long. I got the answer, "We are flying tomorrow." And then, during the conversation, it turned out that the man was married to another woman. His wife had gone somewhere for the day, and he decided to take the moment to calmly pack all his stuff and run away from her and their 3 children. When I dropped them off, the man asked if I wanted to drive them to the airport tomorrow. I refused, which is why he did not leave me a tip. I should have said yes and just not shown up. Screw such jerks. I work as a taxi driver, currently waiting for an order and writing this post. About a year and a half ago, several guys hopped in near the campus and asked to be taken to a city 40 minutes away. The fare was going to be decent. While we were driving, it became crystal clear that the dudes had stopped by the campus to sell some snow near a club. They often switched to Spanish, which I partially understand, and if I caught it right, they managed to move about half a kilo. When they paid me, I saw they had huge wads of cash. The funniest moment of the whole trip was when the oldest one started panicking and demanded we stop for some soda. I think he was high on his own supply. Luckily, I had an unopened can of energy drink handy. He drank it and left me almost a 100% tip. It was one of the most profitable trips of all time. A guy sat in the back seat and discussed on the phone a story about when he pooped his pants, in full detail. I work for Uber as a side hustle, mostly at night. I always start my shift in the party district near the university. Here are my favorite passengers. A 20-year-old girl who repeated one word the entire trip, pancakes. And she did it so abruptly. Pancakes. Sitting next to her were her slightly less drunk friends apologizing for her. A couple sitting in the back doing all sorts of dirty deeds. I think it was a one-night stand. My only request was not to make a mess in the back. They listened to me. An Asian man in his 50s whom I picked up in Koreatown. He tried to convince me the whole way that a woman needs to be slapped for prevention so she listens. I wanted to tell him what a moron he was, but I was too tired and realized it would end with me throwing him out of the car. Generally, no matter how interesting the overheard conversations are, the most interesting trips are when lonely passengers talk to you like a counselor. For me, Uber is like a bar, only without the hangover. Most of my passengers are very cool people. I often get invited to parties. Maybe one day I will actually go to one. I was finishing my night shift, drove my last passenger to the airport. Just as I was pulling away, I saw a guy sitting by the curb, about my age, sobbing. I usually try not to stop in such moments because I know a traffic jam will form behind me immediately. But something was clearly wrong with him, so I decided to stop and find out what happened. I jumped out of the car and asked if he was okay. The guy barely gathered his strength and, gasping through tears, began to explain his situation. He needed to get to Duluth, Minnesota, a 2.5-hour drive. But no taxi driver wanted to pick him up because it was already too late. At that moment, I was fighting terrible depression, which felt like an endless war I could not win. And I felt strong empathy for him. All he needed was a little help. I showed him my driver app on my phone, pointed to the Uber sticker on my car, and offered to drive him for free, no meters or payments. He agreed, gathered his stuff, and we left. We drove to Duluth. We did not talk. There was no need. About an hour into the trip, he came to his senses and asked to use my phone. I agreed. From his conversation, I overheard that he had lost everything. His wife and children had recently died in a car accident. He lost his job, lost his house. And he needed to get to Duluth to see his father, who was on his deathbed. When we arrived, he tried to shove some money at me, but I did not take it. I was struck by the fact that he offered me the last thing he had. A few crumpled bills and pennies wrapped in plastic. He was clearly very grateful, despite losing everything. I was glad to take a load off his shoulders. We drove 2.5 hours and did not say a word to each other. It was nice to know that I could still be useful to someone. When I got home, I woke up my mom and hugged her. There was one drunk passenger who called a girl on speakerphone and tried to invite himself over for the night. She rejected him so harshly that I almost died laughing right there. I am a passenger, but one time I got a driver who described in detail his love for acid, and he was currently on it. When we arrived, he offered us some. Was that trip a 5-star or a 1-star for you? I think the rating depends entirely on the passenger. 5 stars. The driver was awesome. We drove for 35 minutes, so it would have been very awkward to drive that long with a boring driver. I want to tell you what one of my passengers did. The kid was about 14 or 15. Looked normal. He was one of my first clients on Uber. So, we drove a few miles. The trip was supposed to be about $15. But shortly before arriving, he texted his buddy to log into his Uber account and cancel the ride from his phone. Uber has this thing where if the ride has already started, you cannot cancel it from your device, but from another one, no problem. So I drove him, swiped that the ride was complete, and saw what I got for the order, $0. Little jerk. Fortunately, it ended well. I called Uber support, explained what happened, and got my money back, but still. What kind of jerk do you have to be? I am not exactly a driver, but I work in Uber support. Oh, you have no idea what happens in taxis. 90% of my work is calling drivers and passengers and resolving their conflicts. During trips, everything happens. Accidents, passengers going to the bathroom right during the ride. There are serious fights between passengers and drivers. And for various reasons. From racial issues to a passenger simply not wanting to tip. If I describe the darkest stuff here, I will get banned quickly. I do not recommend my job to those who do not want to be disappointed in humanity. My taxi driver buddy once got $500 for letting a passenger do number 2 right in his car. Passenger, we are driving non-stop. $500 if you let me do this. I promise nothing will get on the seats. We have two options. Either he was in a huge hurry, or he planned everything in advance, since it is strange that he had $500 in cash. My buddy agreed. The dude did his business on a newspaper and threw everything out the window. My friend got $500. He also had a story about driving a guy with a heart attack to the hospital. Think about it. This idiot called a taxi instead of an ambulance. To me, that is total darkness. You cannot set up unsuspecting taxi drivers like that. Thank you very much for watching. Taxi and Uber drivers, write in the comments what is the strangest and most interesting thing you have overheard while driving a client. And do not forget to check out our other videos. Bye.